All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are here tonight to talk about Terrifier 2, which we normally don't do a sequel right on top of the original, like we're doing this one. But this movie, much like when we did Barbarian last week, this movie's got so much buzz. If you have not read anything about this, you've just seen it, you're tuning into the show, there have been reports of people leaving theaters, shaking, screaming, puking. There's been a lot going on. Honestly, after watching this, I'm surprised it got a mainstream theater release, but I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to talk about here, and we're going to get to it all. And trust me when I say we're going to get to the gory bits that you're really wondering what we think. But we're going to take our time. We're going to ease it in. We're going to have a couple drinks first. We're going to really woo this thing before we get down to business. So we did Terrifier a couple weeks ago, and Dave and I both mentioned the fact that one had kind of slipped through the cracks for us. We'd managed to go years without seeing Terrifier, and we were definitely not going to let this one happen. People have been so excited about this. They've been talking about it nonstop. It's been one that every horror account that we follow, that follows us on Instagram, every single one of them, hyped for Terrifier 2. So, I mean, there's so much hype. There's really only one question open with, and Dave, does it live up to all the hype, man?
I think it certainly lives up to the hype. To me, it was like Terrifier set this incredible bar.
Right.
That it was going to be impossible to meet, and I kind of think it did. It is definitely a different kind of movie, I think.
Yes.
Because there's a greater emphasis on story here. There's a greater emphasis on the final girl.
Yes.
So I was kind of expecting just everyone to die in the same way that they did in the original Terrifier. But I don't want to call it bloated, because I don't think that the movie was bloated, but it definitely, with the introduction of a character that we really truly care about now, it allowed for us to explore a lot more story. That affected the movie, I think, and therefore feels like a different movie. I think it's also more brutal. It's meaner than the original, because the original, with the exception of one scene, the split in half scene,
right?
I'd say that the rest of the movie, like, it is a fairly mean, gritty movie, but this one took it to a different level. I think that there was a brutality here that I don't want to say wasn't present in the original, because it was just ratcheted up to 11. And so I do understand when people are saying that, like, someone threw up in the movie theater, someone passed out. And usually you hear these things and it's like, okay, well, it was from, like, The Exorcist.
Motion sickness.
And it was 1973, and it's just that no one had seen a movie like that before. This movie manages to do that in a day and age where, like, shock value has, like, reigned supreme for so many years. And we talked about this when we did Barbarian, where, like, things can be shocking, but once you get over that initial shock, it's like, well, did it make sense? Did it matter? And I think it does for this one. So I really enjoyed this. I did find it to be a tougher watch than the original. I got a chance to rewatch about half of it again today.
Right.
And I got right up to about halfway. And then I just got busy and I wasn't able to finish watching. But some of these scenes were no easier to rewatch.
Yeah, man. This I think you're right. It's interesting because so often when something has all this hype or it does have something to live up to, there's so much that goes into that. But back when we did the original Terrifier and we talked about it, really the only thing it had to do to surpass that one was be more creative in any
Mhm.
way, because really the first Terrifier, you mentioned this one does it with story. The first Terrifier, like we did when we did that episode, there wasn't really a story there. It was just a night in the life of these two girls and how everything went
Mhm.
wrong. There were no character arcs. Nobody was made better or worse. And
Yeah,
this
you just
one,
followed this character until they died, and then you
yeah,
followed the next character.
exactly. This one really took everything and cranked it up. It decided to give us characters that were more than just stereotypes and tropes. It gave us some characters with some depth. It gave us a story that there was to follow, where we watch these people develop and learn, and we learned about them. It gave us some mystery that other than just like, what the hell is that thing? That the whole mystery to the first one was like, why is that guy that?
Right.
Now we've got, now there's an entire Art the Clown mythos that, yes, kind of started with All Hallows Eve and was proliferated a little bit within the first Terrorizer, but now there's a lot to this. The minute I started this movie and the little bar at the bottom hadn't gone away yet, I looked and I said, "Son of a bitch, this thing's over 2 hours long."
Yeah.
And I was nervous. I was trying to figure out, what is Art the Clown going to do for 2 hours? Why are people throwing up? How long? I got scared by the timestamp on this movie. But then
Yeah.
it does so much. There's so much more to it than just the brutality. And there is the brutality, but
Mhm.
there's a lot to it. And it's interesting coming to this one on the heels of Barbarian, because so many of the things that we knock Barbarian for, where it was a victim of its own circumstances. Barbarian set itself up for failure by creating this immense amount of gritty realism that it couldn't live up to.
Mhm.
Terrifier in no way does that, so it allows you to just enjoy these things as they're happening. And
Right.
I think it really did live up to it. I was so ready for this movie to be mid, just because I didn't think there was any way for this story of Art the Clown to evolve. And
Mhm.
I'm always impressed when that happens. When you take something that is just two-dimensional gore like the first one was, which we enjoyed. It didn't pretend to be
Yeah.
anything that it wasn't. But they took it, and so I didn't know how they were going to make it anything more. And I was like, all right, just give me some fun kills and then we'll move on, and it'll be all right. But they did a lot more with it. It I think it lived up to the hype of people being excited for it, and it well overshot the expectations I had for it, because I just didn't picture it being what it became. And I genuinely liked it. I think it lived up to all of it, and I was pleasantly surprised.
Yeah. And well, something that we both mentioned is that elongated time. It's about 45 minutes longer than the original Terrifier. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that there's actual story here,
Yeah,
and a lot of it, I think. So much so that I don't think all of the threads were like tied up
correct.
by the end of the movie. And Damien Leone has said that there is a Terrifier 3. that is already in the works. So I don't feel like I've been gypped. I don't feel like okay, the movie needed to wrap itself up in a neat little bow.
Right.
And he says that, so far that there might even be enough that there's going to be a Terrifier 4. So, like, I'm here for it. We
Right.
we talked about this at the end of the original Terrifier. Like, I hope that every 2 or 3 years there's a new Terrifier, and that we get to tune in on Art the Clown and see what fucking shenanigans he's up to that
Yeah.
Halloween. But as far as this story goes, did you find that it worked as a sequel? Did you find that it worked on its own? And I think more than anything, did you find it interesting and scary?
So one of the things that I really did like about the story for this is the fact that, yeah, it worked on its own, much in the way that Terrifier kind of halfway acknowledged that All Hallows Eve existed.
Mhm.
Again, took that and ramped it up. It very much lets you know, yes, stuff happened before now. The Miles County Clown, and they
Mhm.
would talk about it and they would reference it a little bit, but at the same time, you could have just turned this one on and in no way been lost.
Yeah.
They Everything that they referenced, they gave you enough of that to know exactly what was going on. They go back and they talk about the reporter who got attacked. This takes place literally days after the beginning of Terrifier 1 when the woman is attacked by the reporter.
Well, it's weird because it seems like it's taking place either like immediately before or like during, and then after. Like
Yeah,
it starts. I thought of it almost as Evil Dead 2,
right.
where it's like those first 7 minutes of Evil Dead 2 is like a, previously on Evil
Yes.
Dead. And then at like, 7 minutes and like 45 seconds, whatever it is, like as soon as he slams against that tree, it's like now Evil Dead 2 starts.
Right. Yeah, and it was, and so because, yeah, that's the other thing, right? Because the beginning of Terrifier 2 is actually the end, right? And it's the beginning. You
Right.
find out the beginning is a year after the rest of the movie, and so it plays with that, but it gives you just enough that if you had never seen Terrifier, you could watch this and be happy with it. You wouldn't be left out in the cold in that aspect.
Mhm.
As far as the story standing just on its own, and is it good? It's interesting. It
Mhm.
it tells the story of this girl who is a cosplay just impresario.
Mhm.
She makes this amazing cosplay, and her brother is kind of obsessed with Art the Clown. He wants to be the Miles County Clown for Halloween. And while this is going on, we also see Art come back to life in the hospital, and he's off doing
Mhm.
his thing. And these stories eventually meet in the middle. And it did such a good job of making there were plenty of scenes that didn't have art in them that I cared about.
Yeah.
There were scenes that were just about character development, which was so out of left field for
Mhm.
this franchise.
Yeah.
That's what blew me away. And like you said, yes, it went up over 2 hours long, but it wasn't bloated. None of those character development scenes felt like they just got tacked in for no reason. Every one of them played into the story, and we end up with this story of Sienna Shaw just
Mhm.
growing as a person. She starts having dreams about art, and eventually is somehow kind of mystically, cosmically linked to him. There's something there, which is when the story gets into this idea of there's more to it, because there's also this sketchbook that her dad had. And why was her dad so obsessed with the
Right.
girl who got kidnapped, and why was he able to so perfectly draw Art the Clown? And it lends a lot of mystery. It we talked last time about how the college girls, They felt like college girls. They felt like people that we had met. These kids felt like kids who were at that age where, you know, they are just trying to figure out she's trying to figure out who she is. And her little brother's in that age where you just nothing your parents do is right. You can't stand them and all of that. So you just, they felt real. And it was just, I was fascinated by this idea that they did create a story that I cared about. And we were talking off air before we got started. I take notes a lot when I write, when I watch the movies. And this one, I was ready to just like start taking notes about like, oh, here's my favorite kills and stuff like that. And I found myself not picking up the pen, not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I really was engrossed in seeing what happened with Sienna. And I didn't see that coming. So that was nice.
Yeah, you know, I kind of feel the same way. What I still am unsure about how I feel is, you know, we always say that we judge movies based on the movie and not on anything else. We try not to compare it. And to me, I don't know that on its own, that amount of mystery is permissible in a movie. You know, like I have found myself asking, like, but how did her dad, who seemed to have some sort of like brain tumor or something like that, right? That it really affected him cognitively, right? Like we don't know what exactly it is that happened to him, but we know that he's dead. You know, so how did he die? You know, because we know that he drove into a field and
hit a
he
light
killed
post,
himself,
right? Or hit a transformer.
Yeah, he drove into a transformer. That's it. You know, but like, why? And how does art tie into that? That was something that, you know, left me scratching my head, and I'm sure it's going to be torn apart, and we're going to get all of it in part 3.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it. But as it stands right now, I don't know that that's a benefit to the movie. It's probably a benefit to the series, but I don't know if it's a benefit to the movie. You know, and I kind of think of The Empire Strikes Back in that way. You know, I think of The Empire Strikes Back as the best Star Wars movie because I'm a man of taste. But but if you look at Empire Strikes Back on its own, like, it doesn't have an ending.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
It's got a pretty shit ending. Like there's this great reveal, and then there's this cliffhanger, and unless Return of the Jedi sticks the landing, it doesn't work. And I kind of feel like that's where Terrifier 2 is right now. Like, you know, what is the deal with the sword?
Yes. What is the deal with the sword? What is the deal with the hole in the ground in the funhouse?
Yeah. You know, like does it actually take you to a physical place, or is it some sort of, you know, demonic realm? Why does the demon, who we assume, I think that there's enough there, you know, that we can assume that that's the demon that resurrected Art. Like, why?
Right.
You know, we still didn't get an answer there, and I'm okay with that because I'm sure that we're going to get an answer, but it's an assumption. I don't know. So as it stands right now, like none of these things I think impede your ability to watch and enjoy the movie. And I think that that's where there's a clear distinction between Terrifier 2 and Barbarian. With Barbarian, I constantly found myself shaking my head saying, really, what the fuck? And with Terrifier 2, I kind of just went, I guess we'll get to it. You know, and even if we didn't, I was okay with so much of the rest of it that I was like, yeah, I dig it. And you know, there's really so much to love about this movie that those little quibbles that I have about mystery, and it is mystery. It's not that it doesn't make sense. It's just that it's a mystery.
Right.
Are forgivable because there's going to be another installment. If this was the end, I would say, you know what? I don't think it works.
Right.
but I know that there's something coming.
Yeah, and there's also a part of the story that's really great is this constantly evolving and growing, and like I said, I don't even want, yes, it's changing, but changing for the better. So I think evolving is a better word. Mythos of Art the Clown. When you go all the way back to All Hallows Eve, and it's just this weird clown who's in these different vignettes, and then maybe he lives in the TV. We're not quite sure. Right. So that's, that, but so you get a little bit of that and you're like, okay. Then in the second one, all you really get is this is a clown who is, just insanely sadistic and sick and twisted. And that's all we really get. And that was fine. That's what we needed from it, because in the first one, he was really just creep value in All Hallows Eve. Then we needed to see why he is the Terrifier. We needed to understand that. And so now we start to get, but then at the very end, you get the little bit more of, oh shit, and he can come back to life. Okay. And so now we start to get a little bit more of that. We get the touch of All Hallows Eve when there's a TV in his lair that we see is not plugged in. The girl Terrifier is holding the cord, but the TV still comes on anyway. We also see that Art is apparently not a big fan of his own press, because or just of the fact that he left someone alive
I think
to
that's
bother him. Yeah. And so then it starts. So then we're like, okay, so
and that I don't know if you picked up on it, but that is the opening scene of Terrifier 1.
Yes.
But we're seeing it with like the knowledge that he has come back to life, and so now we're seeing it with the demon Terrifier there.
Yes.
And I loved that like there were times where, like, when other people were viewing Art, they don't see the demon. But when we, as the omniscient observer, are watching, like, we can see the demon.
Yeah.
But this did lead me to have like another instance where I was like, okay, I'm sure this will be explained, but as of right now, it's just nonsense. Why does the boy, fuck, I forgot his name, why is he able to see the demon? Jonathan. Why is he able to see the demon? Because he sees both Art and the demon.
Right. Yeah. And that's that part. Yes, I agree with you, because that is definitely a loose end right now, is how the girl figures in. What is it about her death that made her be more than just another victim? And is that related to why he didn't just kill Jonathan? He abducted Jonathan because they wanted Sienna there. So you're right. But none of it is this doesn't make any sense. It's just, I don't know yet.
Yeah. I do think that the image of the little girl, which it's, I guess, suggested that Art killed her at some point.
Correct.
I do think that the demon assumes different forms, because the demon speaks and shows up as Sienna and Jonathan's mother.
And uses Jonathan's voice when calling Sienna.
Right. So Jonathan is the one that says, that's not mom.
Yeah.
And so the demon can, like, shape shift, and I'm okay with that. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you're playing with rules to a game that you're creating.
Yes.
So like,
this
the
is Calvin
demon
Ball.
shapeshifts. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's there was, so that evolving story and understanding of what Art is, and how he is, what am I trying to say here? He's how he thinks, really. That started to evolve in a way that was very interesting and made him more three-dimensional, which was odd, because one thing about this movie no matter what you think about this movie, you cannot take anything away from the fact that this image of Art the Clown is so good. This, anybody, even if you don't know what the movie's called, if somebody shows you a picture of Art the Clown, you've seen it somewhere.
It's like, oh, that's that
yes,
killer clown guy.
Yes, if you've seen it, you will remember, because it is burned into your memory. And that was where they started with that, and they could have stuck with that. They could have created this entire franchise just based on the fact that this guy has got a look. But you can tell that Damon Leone has something in mind for why Art is what he is. And maybe we eventually kind of find out a little bit more. Maybe we don't. But we did delve into it a little bit more. We find out that his home base seems to be this old fun house called Terrifier, and that there is some sort of portal to a demonic realm to inside his head. I don't know, because what Sienna is comes face to face with when she falls into it is the dream that she was having about
the Clown Cafe.
The Clown Cafe. Oh my God.
Food's a little funny at the Clown Cafe.
Yes.
I can't get that song out of my fucking head.
Dude, me either.
And it's so punny. Fuck, man. It's the writing is really good here, and Leon does have, I think, a clear idea of who art is, what art is, how art works, and he's just stringing us along for the ride.
Yes.
He's like, but wait, there's more.
Exactly. And
like little things like the glowing eyes, like the yellow glowing eyes, which we see in All Hallows Eve. Art has that. And we see that the demon girl has it here. And it's like, oh shit, he just hasn't learned how to do the fucking eye thing yet.
Right.
But he's there.
Yeah, and we also see at the mid credits, we see that the girl that he attacked and left alive, her eye glows too. Which, I mean, that mid credit scene, man, that story aside, that thing, that was disturbing. That there's a lot here that we're going to get to that is just guttural and brutal. But that mid credit scene was, one, just god awful disturbing, but two, it also again kept the story going in such a weird fucking way. Like it was the perfect kind of cherry on this Sunday of Terrifier 2, because it brought everything back full circle. It closed everything in on itself, while also just making you sit with your face in your hands and just trying to process what you just saw. Which this movie,
there is no processing that.
There isn't. This up until that scene, as brutal as things got, I always kind of understood the science and the physics and the biology of what was happening, right?
Yeah.
The mid-credits scene, we see the woman who survived the first one in
Victoria,
in an asylum, and she is giving birth, we eventually find out, but at the beginning it just seems that she's just using uterine blood to write just the filthiest words possible that she can up on the wall, just like how Art had carved them into her. And and it wasn't into her, that he carved those into somebody else.
The other girl.
That was the other girl.
All Hallows Eve.
Yeah. But so these filthy words. And then she gives birth, kind of, but it's just to Art's head. Yeah. And then her eye starts glowing and they're laughing. And it's just, it's so freaking weird, right?
And then it's offset by the amazing Chris Jericho.
Yes, exactly. Which
and his wife's like Halloween like jelly,
the zombie platter.
Oh my god, it was just. I mean, it's so funny, and it's so cringe at the same time. It's like, oh my god.
It was the perfect bow to put on this thing, to leave me like, okay, well, Art's head is back. I can only assume that the rest of him is going to grow from that now. I'm good. I get it. Okay. But it was just, I really thought that they did such a good job of telling the story of Sienna that didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like her grief or her angst were overplayed at any point. It felt written truthfully. And grief's a funny thing. And we've discussed that at length, especially back when we did Hereditary and Midsommar. But it was interesting to see both of these kids living the exact same trauma and how they both processed it differently, and how their memories of their dad were individualized, and what they both wanted to hold on to from their dad. And Jonathan wanted to explore what his dad was and what he was into, whereas Sienna just wanted to live happily with this one really great memory of this essentially D&D character that her dad had created for her. And I thought that if you had told me going into this that there was a story about that, I would have assumed that it was just going to be trash and that they were just trying to stretch this thing out, because I didn't see. We loved the first Terrifier, but we didn't get any indication that Damon Leone was going to tell a compelling story.
Right.
And so the very short-sighted view I had of him wasn't that I didn't think he didn't have the ability. I just had no frame of reference for him to have that ability. And now that I've got it, I almost wonder if the story here in Terrifier 2 is going to snowball on him, because now everybody's going, well, now you can be brutal and you can tell a good story. How are you going to do it again?
Top yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Like you just raise the bar to the nth level on yourself, man. You have set yourself up. His work is cut out for him going into 3.
Well, and he said in a couple of interviews that the character of Sienna is as old as Art the Clown is. That when he first envisioned Art the Clown, he envisioned him fighting an armor-clad girl with angel wings. Not that she was an angel, but that it was an armor-clad girl with angel wings. And that's exactly what we see here. So he didn't have the budget to do it in All Hallows Eve or in Terrifier. Because like he really just needs to give you like some bare bones. Here's Art the Clown. You like it? I got some more for you. And that's what he gave us here. And I think again, he's not overplaying his hand, where he's like, all right, let's see how you feel about this, because if you like it, I do have more for you.
Yeah.
And he keeps dropping these hints of like, I am a badass storyteller and I can get you to where it is that I want you to go, but I need to make sure that you're buying into it.
Yeah. So this idea that Sienna is a character like a character in the movie playing a character from sort of Art's background or something like that. I mean, as we're looking at all these people, we've referenced a bunch of them, but minus the obvious, we'll get to him. We got a lot of fresh faces here. We've got a lot of people who play parts in this, more so, exponentially more so than the first Terrifier. So, I mean, who stands out, good or bad? Tell me about some of your favorites, if there's anybody you didn't like.
So I was thoroughly surprised, and also it warmed the cockles of my heart to see Felissa Rose back in a horror movie.
Yes.
She plays Miss Principe, and she is obviously from Sleepaway Camp. And we love Sleepaway Camp. We love her. So it was great to see her even in something that was like barely more than a cameo.
Yeah.
But it was great to see her acting in a horror movie again. Like I was because I haven't seen her in anything since Return to Sleepaway Camp, which was like 2008.
Yeah.
So it's been a minute. So it was great to see her. But on like the main cast, I mean, I would be remiss to mention Lauren Rivera as Sienna Shaw. I mean,
Yeah.
she blew me fucking away. Oh my god. She can act. She's drop dead gorgeous.
Yep.
Like I had to look up her age because I
Just
needed to be sure
yeah,
that
fair.
the way that I felt was permissible, even in Florida where there are very few laws. For myself, I needed to be okay with that. So she blew me away. She was awesome. There was that steely resolve that is present in all great final girls, and she was a great final girl.
Yes.
You got emotional turmoil from her. You got determination from her. It was an incredible performance, I think. For me, the other one that stood out to me was Kaylee Hyman as Brooke.
Yeah.
The fun loving, easygoing kind of girl who just she the blonde girl in the first Terrifier. I feel like she kind of fills
Mhm.
that spot, but she does so in a much more endearing way. From the very moment that you meet her, it's like, oh, this girl has like no filter. She just like she does what she wants,
Even if it's
and
drugging her friends.
even if it's drugging her friends, yeah, and like that was one of those things where it's like, okay, so like you're wrong. You shouldn't ever drug your friend. But I kind of see where you're coming from,
But
right?
yeah.
And mission accomplished also because Sienna did end up having a good time at that
Mhm.
party. To me, those were like the standout performances. And it was difficult to see Brooke die, but it was also like it had to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when you look at Lauren Rivera as Sienna, she brought something to the screen that was intangible in
Mhm.
what she did. There was that ability to harness like I said, the angst didn't feel forced. It didn't. I never felt like, okay, this is an actor pretending to be grieving in her own way. It
Right.
all felt very natural, which was impressive. And
Mhm.
it it never felt like she was doing anything. Everything she did felt right. It felt like it belonged in this character
Yeah.
of Sienna Shaw that she was, and that was super impressive for everything that we saw her go through, from the weird clown cafe dream to the just listening to crazy awesome, like I'm usually not a synth guy, but like some of the synth music in this was
Okay, so
super solid.
dude, the movie opens with what is literally my favorite synthwave band. It's a band called The Midnight, and that song "You're Not Alone"
Yeah.
is one of my favorites of theirs. So that song comes on, and I'm like, that is not the score. That's fucking The Midnight, and
Yeah.
oh my god, it got me so pumped. And I was like, that's it. This is like the greatest fucking movie of all time.
and so when we first meet her, we get that she's building this costume and all of this, but then we see her with her friends and she's very pretty. So you're like, okay, so she's not playing the role of weird nerdy girl. She seems to be decently popular, and she's
Right.
very pretty, and she just also is in tune with who she is and what she loves, and that was really cool. So I did like her a lot. I loved Jonathan. I did really
Mhm.
like her brother, because the other side of that coin, as being younger and being that age where parents just don't understand. He was in that age,
Yeah.
and nobody could understand the grief that he was going through, and he was just going to act out however he wanted, and he just wanted answers. he was in this place where, whereas Sienna was in a place where her dad had passed, she was ready to move on and just live with the memories of him that were good. Jonathan wasn't in that place. Jonathan wanted more out of it. And it never felt forced that he was really into this stuff. It felt real. It felt real. It felt like something that a kid who was dealing with that grief in that position, who had found the sketchbook from their dad, it felt like that would be a good reason for him to be in it. And that moment where he finally gets just pushed as far as he can go, and he hits that breaking point, right? That a lot of people have had when you're a teenager, calls his mom a bitch, and catches that right
There's
hand.
no coming back from that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, ooh, but it was interesting because he does it. She slaps him, and then you can see it in his face where he knows he fucked up.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have done that."
Yeah, and that he deserved it, but then still acts out in a way that is appropriate for that age and that character by running away. But then we're immediately reminded of the fact that he is a child when he gets scared and he goes home. Got to go home. Got scared. Got to go home. Every kid at some point packed a bag, right? And maybe you actually walked out to the corner because you'd had enough and you were leaving. And he did that. And then
I did once.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so he did that and he ran. But then again, immediately reminded that he's a child, gets scared, got to go home. He needs his mom. That was all so good. And that kid played it without it ever feeling overacted.
Yeah. And there was one moment where something you said reminded me of it when he tells Sienna that that's not her mom that he's talking to.
Mm-hmm.
Did you notice what he said? He goes, "That's not mommy."
That's not mommy. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I did. I noticed that in that exact moment too. Because they also always referred to their dad as daddy. Both of them did, like when they were talking about him. So those two, and then the other one for me that was a really interesting character, because again, so often with a horror movie, when a character becomes interesting is when they have the potential to be really two-dimensional, and the actor goes above and beyond at some point to drive it home. Sarah Voigt as Barbara, the mom, is presented just straightforward, strict mom, going through it and just doing her best, right? Single mom who works 2 jobs, the whole Reba intro, right? Like that's the way she's presented. But then you have this moment where Sienna, she's rolling on Molly at the party.
I'm sorry. I'm laughing because I was running through the Reba theme song and it ends with "I'm a survivor." And I'm like, no, the fuck you're not.
Yeah, exactly. So she walks out to her car and she sees that it's covered in shaving cream, toilet paper, pumpkins busted on the thing, and somebody's written "bitch" on the windshield, which is what Jonathan had just called her before she slapped him and he ran away. And so she's convinced he did it. She calls Sienna. He's dead. He's gone too far. Sienna's rolling and and trying to process all of this, which, if anybody out there who's ever enjoyed a little MDMA knows that it can be hard to take anything seriously.
She does a bang up job.
She does
of it though,
dude. It was so incredible because she's like, all right, yeah, she drinks, it's like shot of whiskey and a rum and Coke, and she's walking around rubbing stuff, and I was like, when did this chick do X? Because this girl is rolling, and she's like, the whiskey hit me, and I was like, nah, girl, you're rolling. And then she's eventually like, I spiked a drink with Molly. I was like, there it is. And so the mom is just livid, and she's screaming about how Jonathan's gone too far, and Sienna is just kind of letting it wash over her, and she just goes, "I love you," and the mom stops, and it's that, and she kind of freezes, and she says, "What?" And she says, "I love you. I don't say it enough." And kudos to Sarah Voigt, her face and her demeanor.
It softens right away.
She relaxes and softens so much that you can feel it through the TV. She becomes a completely different person. And in that moment, I was like, wow, she's doing an incredible job. Granted, she didn't last much longer, but,
No.
but in that moment, in that 2.5 second shot, she took that character to a whole nother level. And it was super impressive. I was very happy with that moment, because again, when we did the first Terrifier, we talked about how two-dimensional the characters could have been if the actresses had not acted their asses off. And that is what happened in this moment. That very easily could have been just this two-dimensional strict mom who can't take anymore. And in that moment, she seized it and she elevated that character, and it was great.
I will say that there was one character moment, and it had nothing to do with acting. It had everything to do with writing that was somewhat disappointing to me. And I should have mentioned this earlier when I was talking about Lauren Lavera. One of the things that we mentioned about the original Terrifier is that the movie was sexy without being overtly about sex.
Right.
And there's one scene that to me stands out in a negative way. And that's the scene where Sienna is suiting up to go out.
Yeah.
To me, it's no longer that she's just like a beautiful actress playing a great character. She was sexualized.
Yeah. I mean, straight up shower scene with a bunch of side boob.
Yeah, and listen, I'm here for it.
Yeah, no, not mad at the side boob, but I see what you're saying.
At all. But to me, it seemed like it seemed out of place, because the rest of that suiting up was fine.
Yeah,
you know, it was
straight out of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, it actually, you know what it reminded me of? A movie I've mentioned constantly is Commando. When Schwarzenegger's putting on that vest and he's putting the knife and the grenades and all that. And it's like, that's Sienna suiting up to go to war, and she doesn't even know it yet. But it's that one shot of the shower, man. To me, it's like what would have otherwise been a near perfect movie is marred by that. It's the only instance in the movie where I think that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah,
because
I don't disagree.
It's distracting.
Yeah,
it's distracting. I mean, because she's so beautiful, you know, where it's like you're sucked out of it for a moment, where it's like, you know, oh shit, and it's no longer about the fact that, you know, this character is a beautiful girl, and it's also that she's a girl. She's playing a high school age girl.
Yeah.
So like for a moment you sexualized a child. I mean, she didn't look like a child, but within the story, within the context you did. And to me, it's the only character moment of what I think is the greatest character in the movie.
Right.
Where I was like, oh yeah, no, it's a no from me, dog.
Well, and then there's one more character that, and we had mentioned a second ago, but Chris Jericho is Burke. Just Chris Jericho being what's even funnier about it is when the opening credits are rolling, his is the last name. I was like, no shit, Chris Jericho's in this. And then the credits start rolling, and I was like, okay, I've been a wrestling fan a very long time, and I'm very confident in my ability to pick Chris Jericho out of a lineup. And I don't think I saw. And so I'm like watching the credits roll, and it's like Chris Jericho's Burke. And I'm like, how do I not remember who Burke is? And I'm just staring.
Was he in prosthetics?
Yeah, like desperate. You know, it's like, okay, if you miss Nathan Fillion in Guardians of the Galaxy, it makes sense, right? He was blue and covered in prosthetics. So I'm just trying to figure out, I'm like, so I'm trying to remember who Burke is. And then it cuts to that scene, and he's the orderly. And it's just, and it was so great because it wasn't him. It was him playing Chris Jericho as an orderly. Like it wasn't like he was trying to create a new character. It literally just was, here's what Chris Jericho would be like if you were an orderly at a mental hospital. And I was like, yep. All right. Kudos to you, Chris Jericho. Thank you, sir.
So the only character we haven't mentioned is Art himself.
Yeah.
And I mean, what is there to say about Art that hasn't already been said? Except that we have a different Art here. This is not the Art from Terrifier. He is literally reborn. I mean, we see it
Yeah.
happen twice, right?
Correct.
So this is a different Art. Um, is there anything you want to add or maybe change about what was said about Art from that first movie? You know, because we know who that Art is, but this
Right.
Art, what sticks out at you as like, fuck, that's gonna stick with me for a while.
Well, first thing I'd like to say about Art, shout out to Tyler Nafe, fan of the show, for texting me and pointing this out. Art is played by David Howard Thornton, who is from
Mhm.
Huntsville, Alabama. So,
Is he?
yeah, Tyler
Wow.
pointed that out to me. So, thank you, Tyler, for making me realize that Art is a hometown boy. But so what's interesting about Art here is when we got Art in the first one, and when we got playful Art, it was still sadistically playful, right?
Right.
Every Art moment we had in the first Terrifier that kind of made you snicker a little bit was still while something gruesome was happening, usually, or on the
Yeah.
heels of something gruesome. What we get in this one, yes, there are moments that make you laugh because Art
Yeah.
is being gruesome, like serving kids candy in the actual real head,
Right.
stuff like that. And yes, that's funny. It is. I'm sorry. It's just which one of us went out?
That was me. Sorry
Oh,
about
okay.
that.
And look, I don't care if you're watching Terrifier, then you're gonna find that to be funny.
Mhm.
But the moment that stuck out for me so much as being so ridiculous and actually childly playful was Art trying on the sunglasses and the noisemakers and shit in the
Yes.
Halloween store. That
Mhm.
was such a different side of Art, especially because he puts on the flower ones and he's just standing there real stoic. So he's got these ridiculous glasses on and no look on his face. And then she looks back and it's the glasses that are big and he's doing the same thing with his hands and smiling. And then he starts,
and then the googly eyes.
yes, and then the noise, he's blowing the party noisemaker, and the guy's like, if you put your mouth on that, you gotta buy it. And he does the slow little like that shit.
It was funny.
Oh my god, it was like that was you could that exact moment it could be in any sitcom ever and you'd
Yeah.
laugh at it, right? If Chandler Bing had done that shit, we'd still be laughing at it. But the fact that Art the Clown did it,
Mhm.
my stomach hurt. I was laughing so hard as that bit just kept going. And it was so weird because I'm laughing hysterically. The music is obviously building tension because Sienna is
Mhm.
getting more and more freaked out. And I can't stop laughing. I thought that moment took this character to something brand new, which was
Mhm.
like, this dude can be more than just a sadistic clown. He can just be a clown. And that was so weird. And you had this really weird moment where you were like, maybe he's not so bad.
Yeah.
Then yes, does he immediately cut a guy's head off? Yes. Yes, he does. So we get that one extreme. But goddamn, did we also get the extreme of this guy? This guy has limitless ideas of horrible things to do
Mhm.
to people, and thinks it's all hilarious. And that was the other side of it, right? It was oh god, there's a moment where he has, and we're going to talk blood and gore, but there's a moment where he's just absolutely brutalized this girl and leaves, and you think the scene's over, and he comes running back
Oh
holding
my
more
god.
implements of destruction,
It's just as funny as it is brutal.
and it's so fucking funny, and
Yeah.
it's and we're I don't know, this is if hell's real, this is why we're going, right? Because that shit was funny. And And it's so bizarre to be able to watch a movie with a character like this where you can laugh at him trying on goofy glasses while also laugh at him prancing back into a room holding a bottle of bleach and a thing of Morton salt. And it's art makes you question your humanity and your sanity simultaneously, which is a fascinating take on a horror movie character.
Yeah, if you want to be certain whether or not you're a decent person, watch this. And if you laugh at art, you're not, but you're
not.
also more than likely very good friends with us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, man, I think that a lot of art's humor was ramped up in this one. Because there were a lot of really humorous moments in that first Terrifier, but I feel like he wasn't always funny. Like there were instances where he was funny.
Yes.
But that was played up a lot here. It's like he was always funny. He was always on here, and maybe Leon saw that like that did well with audience members, and he's like, okay, well let's play this up. Let's really get the clown thing going here. You kind of really see that like who Art really is when he's sitting naked in the laundromat, right?
Yes.
And like I was wondering like why is he stealing money from this guy?
Yeah,
like I
change.
It wouldn't surprise me that he did because there's almost no motivation for what he does. It's just that's what he felt like doing at the moment.
Yeah,
it like his impulse control is awful. It's terrible. Or it's fantastic.
Or it's fantastic.
He's just at it.
Yeah, he knows exactly what he wants to do and does it.
He's a real go-getter. So and he's sitting there and he's laughing at the newspaper and you're like, oh, he's reading like the comics, the funny page, and he's not. He's looking at like a fatal car crash,
Yes.
with a family of 4, and he's sitting there laughing his ass off, and it's so childish, but and like there's an innocence to it, but the innocence is twisted.
Yeah,
it's really odd because like immediately after that he seems afraid when he sees the demon.
Yes.
And if not afraid, confused at the very least. And to me that was a really interesting scene because it's the first time I've ever seen Art not be sure of himself.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh fuck, this is really interesting. Does he recognize the girl? Because now watching it the second time around, I was like, oh, okay, so I knew it from the very beginning. That's the girl that was murdered, at the theme park all those years ago. And he's like, does he recognize her? And he's wondering why she's back. Does he know that this is the demon? When she urinates or defecates that black
was.
ooze, whatever it was, hell goo, let's call it. He's like, huh, that's weird, but like very quickly gets over it.
Yeah.
And like just goes along with it. The patty cake thing is like, oh, so that's what we're doing now. Okay, cool. And then again, that image of him, and he really knows how to sell it. Like hunched over with the mop. If he were standing erect, like it wouldn't have the same comedic value, but it was almost like a fucking Goofy cartoon. And like I could just hear the narrator like, this is a Goofy how-to. This is how you mop the floor. And notice as the man takes the mop and wipes the floor clean. And that I could hear it in my mind, and it was like, fuck, that's really funny. And then of course the pan over to the guy sitting there, the attendant, and now you know why he's hunched over. Because there's half the fucking mop missing because he used the other half to impale this guy in the head. So it is really funny, but also the brutality is ratcheted up to 11. There were instances that I feel like were callbacks. Like I love the use of the Tommy gun. In this movie, because that the taking of that that Browning and then just like bam, 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 right into her face in that first one was alarming because I think I'm watching a slasher. And all of a sudden he whips out a gun. Like, that just doesn't happen in slashers. So that was amazing to see him like going through his bag of tricks, and like it's like, okay, well, what's he gonna take out? Is it the cat of nine tails again? Is it this thing? Is it this other thing? And out comes a fucking Tommy gun. And I'm like, fuck yes. And he just mows everyone down. We get beautiful shots of the guy's face getting ripped up. It's amazing, right? So there were great callbacks like that, but there's also, I think, an up to level of brutality. That scene with what was the friend's name? Was it Allie?
Allie.
Yeah, Allie. That scene, wow. It is really difficult to watch. I can understand why people say that they threw up or they passed out. Like, I believe it. Again, I don't know if it's true. It could be a bit of like brilliant marketing, but I believe it. Like, as a fan of this genre that like kind of toes that line often between like, is it okay to watch this? Is it not okay to watch this? Like, this is bordering on snuff. Like, but again, I think Leon really has a grasp of what makes violence tolerable. And it's that like Paul Verhoeven school of violence where it's like, it's as they say in A Clockwork Orange, it's you know, a bit of the ultra violent.
Yes,
You know, because it is so ultra violent that it approaches cartoonish.
Yeah,
It is cartoonish in its over the top.
And I think that's what kind of sets some of the violence in this apart from something like a Hostel, where in Hostel we're watching what is obviously a guy that we might know do this to a person that we might know. When you watch this, you're right, it becomes cartoonish because it's a clown doing it. And so you get right up to that edge. And you look over the side and you just spit off of it, right? You just that's how close you are. There's one other thing about art that I don't think can ever be understated, and that is how freakishly strong he must be to heft this bag around of all this shit. When he goes trick-or-treating to Allie's house and he opens up the bag, by the way, I don't know what brand of trash bags he's using. They must be from whatever realm he is, but I need them. Exactly. I can't put a pizza box in mine without getting crap all over the floor. He's got a bone saw on top of a cat of nine tails full of scalpels and the leg of a table with an axe in it. Not a rip in that bag. But he just got like the way he always just throws that thing over his shoulder, and then we get reminded what's in it, and it's like, God, this dude's strong.
Yeah, well, and it's put to use in that scene because like he just like jiggers her arm around and pop, and I was like, oh fuck, like it was wow, and the splitting of the hand, you know, all the way up to the forearm. Wow.
Yeah.
What a fucking scene. And it's we'll talk about the violence.
I mean, let's just get into it. We're talking about it now. I mean, that's where we are. The violence and the gore here. We're saying it. It's ultra violence. I mean, let's get into it. That scene with Allie. Whoo, that was something.
And the thing is, Leon does his own special effects work. Yeah. Like the guy is. I was talking to former co-host on the or guest on the podcast, Ralph Diaz-Wagner, who is a film guy himself. He's worked in the film industry, made a couple of horror movies, Attack of the Killer Donuts. So this guy knows movies, and I'm talking to him and I'm saying, dude, I just watched this scene because he walked into my classroom. We had dismissed already. No students had come around for help. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll watch some of this. And that scene had just ended. And he walked in and I said, dude, I think this guy's like on the same level as Tom Savini. And he was like, whoa, do you know what you're saying right now? And I said, I know exactly what the fuck I'm saying. And fuck, Rock, man, I mean, I really think he is, because he knows exactly when to cut away I mean, that first slice down her face.
Yeah. Oh
Wow, I mean,
man.
it's
Ooh.
it's seamless. It is seamless, and then the scissors to the scalp, and there's such aggression, such brutality there with the ways that Art uses those scissors. I mean, it's angry.
Yeah, man.
It's really angry.
That scene, dude, and he just kept going, and it was different stuff.
Mhm.
Like you said, he just rips her arm off at the elbow, grabs her hand, and just splits it in half to to the forearm.
Yeah.
There was, but then this, this is what I was talking about, where then there just comes that moment where like we said, you're not a decent person, but you're probably our friend. If you laughed at it, you think it's over, and you're just watching this girl suffer, and he comes prancing back into the room with the bottle of bleach
And he
a
shows
thing
it
of
to her like,
salt.
"Look what's
Yes,
next."
and he's dancing and smiling about it, and he pours bleach and salt all over this girl. It doesn't just pour it; he's rubbing this into her entire body's an open wound at this point. He had flayed open her back. Her entire body's an open wound at this point, and he's just pouring it onto her. And then again, where this approaches what can really only be described as ultra violence, the mom walks in, and he's just sitting there toying and playing with her, and you find out she's not dead.
Yeah.
She's still alive, and she's suffering through all of this. At this point, the part of her face where he had slit it open has been ripped open, and she calls out for her mom.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it becomes so much more violent somehow.
Yeah.
Right? Because she's surviving this, and she's being tortured. And when that scene did finally end, I was like, that's got to be the one, right? That's got to be the moment that was making people throw up and pass out or whatever in the theaters. My cat just
But there's more.
fell out of a china cabinet. Like I've
Is
got
it
a
okay?
Yeah, it's fine. We've got like a china cabinet over here where we don't store china in it because what do I need china for? So it's just got stuff in it, and it's where I store my recording stuff. So it's open from when I got it up, and the cat had managed to get up in there and just fell out. Anyway, that's why I was looking over the side. But but then it's so interesting. There's so much more creative and insane violence in this.
Yeah.
And I will give Damon Leone credit. He decided he's got another one, and he was going to go equal opportunity genital mutilation. In the first one, we get a girl sawed in half through the vajayjay. In this one, we get a guy who gets stabbed in the dick and crotchal area no less than 9 times before Art just rips it off and uses it to taunt his girlfriend by smacking it on the window.
But not before he wrote in like the dust that was on the window, just the tip. He has such a sense of humor is the thing. It's like putting salt on an open wound, just the tip. Like, he's fucking hysterical.
Yeah. And so it was just, and then you were talking about in the first one how shocking it was when he pulled a gun out, and so in this one pulls out the Tommy gun. We get that great scene, and so then you get into this habit of him doing these really elaborate things to kill and torture people. And then you get the mom cleaning up the shaving cream on the car, wipes it off. There's Art. And it's just one solo blast from the double barrel sawed off. Mm-hmm. And it just demolishes her face. And even though I'm used to him using a gun, that scene had the same shock appeal as him laying into that girl with the Browning in the first one.
Yeah. And I think to go back to Tom Savini, Leon being a special effects guy, I have to see that scene as a callback to Tom Savini's exploding head, which he did twice. He did it in Dawn of the Dead, the very opening of the movie when the police are raiding the apartment building,
Yeah.
and then again in Maniac.
Oh yeah, I
We
forgot about that
we
one.
get the shot, and it is a shotgun. It's a shotgun blast to the head, and boom, and it is Tom Savini's head actually.
Yeah.
In that one, and to me, that's what that was. I saw it happen. And I'm like, fuck, that was Maniac. That's what that was, because it was even through a car window, and like, man, it was so effective, and it led to what I think was again another brutally funny moment, which is when Jonathan comes back home and he's made dinner. Like he's actually gone through the effort of making dinner, and I didn't think about why it was mashed potatoes at first.
Right.
At first, I was just like, okay, well, he went through the cabinets and he found some instant mashed potatoes and threw those on. I guess he knows how to cook, right? But earlier in the movie, when they're first sitting down to have dinner, they're having mashed potatoes with whatever it is that they're eating. So like it was like the last thing to be put back in the cabinet. And so like to me it's such a like funny little quirk where it's like, he opens it up, he's like, mashed potatoes, I guess. and that's what he makes, but then he fucking takes a fistful of it and just shoves it into the open fucking cranium
Yes.
of Barbara. Oh my god.
It was just there was there was just so much. And again, after watching the first one, it was, how's he going to top that? And he topped it by making each one have this moment of brutal comedy. When he comes out, before he even shoves the fistful of the mashed potatoes in her face hole, he comes out, and it's, we always look for little callbacks to other horror movies, and it reminds me of Texas Chainsaw. When Leatherface comes out in the apron and he's got the different mask on with the lipstick and stuff. It's like that, because he comes out and he's very Susie Homemaker, and he's got the pot, and it's and you could tell it's like, okay, it's time for dinner, but it's not like we didn't know the mom's body was right there, because we saw that first.
Right.
So that this is a gruesome and horrifying scene, and yet he stole the attention so much that you were able to get a little chuckle out of him doing that. And it was so weird. It's this movie, and the violence and the character of Art the Clown has become so fascinating. It's such a bizarre exploration into how to toy with people's emotions. So often the what we get toyed with when you're watching a horror film is just how you're going to be scared. And I just started Midnight Club, by the way. I'm a couple episodes in. And in episode 1, there's this really great moment where it's in the first meeting of the Midnight Club, and the girl's telling her story, and the people at the table call her out for a bullshit jump scare. And the dudes, one of the dudes says something. He says something along the lines of, "There's a difference between being scared and being startled." And so often, the way that we're toyed with during a horror movie is just the tension of when is the next time we're going to be startled. This movie and the first one toy with your emotions in a way of you're just on such a bizarre roller coaster of what you're feeling. If you're all in on the movie, if this is just gruesome and you can't buy into any of it, then you're probably not going to find
for you.
Then this movie's not for you. That's the other thing about Damon Leone. He knows his audience. He knows exactly who he's playing to. And he has found a way to tap into this idea of us not knowing what we're feeling. You can't, every time you settle into feeling one thing, you're faced with something else. And that moment of, oh God, this kid is facing his mother's blown away head that's so horrible. And then he comes in the apron and the mashed potatoes and he's serving it on the plate and it's so funny. And then by the time you're kind of relaxed a little bit because it's funny, he just smashes them in there and you're horrified again.
And then you're like, oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're just, it's so exhausting in the best possible way to watch these movies. There's a fascinating case study here in human emotion. And like, I want to see somebody go get your average movie fan who's maybe seen a couple scary movies but doesn't like to watch them that much. Like I want to see Neary's brain hooked up to a bunch of probes while he watches Terrifier, and then like hours.
Good luck, man. Like, I don't think he's watching this one.
but like somebody like a Neary, right?
Yeah,
like,
no,
I'm
right there with you.
Yeah, like this is when this podcast goes global someday and we've got connections, that's the type of thing that we're going to do episodes about, right? Every once in a while, it's going to be like, here's our brains hooked up. Let's watch this movie. And it's going to be completely different centers of mine and yours lighting up as compared to, the average Joe Blow who's like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll do this. What's Terrifier? Because there's something really interesting there about what Damon Leone understands about his audience. And I think that that's great. Like, I think that it's amazing. I said this at the top, that this even got mainstream theater release. I went to see Black Adam this past weekend, and I noticed that Terrifier 2 we have one theater in Tuscaloosa, and Terrifier 2 is still getting a showtime every day till this week. It's still in there one time. So people are going to see it. And that's incredible. That is just so great that something like this that is so niche is getting a mainstream theater review, and people are watching it and people are enjoying it. And that's great for the genre. That's great for people who are willing to explore the idea of doing something new. Is this a sequel? Yes. But it's a sequel to a movie that wasn't like anything we'd seen before it.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we're not just out, we are still out there just making Halloween movies, but that's not all that we're doing. Right. And that's great. And people want it. And I love that so much. And it's incredible to me that he's so tapped in, that he's so on board with what his audience wants to see and how he's still going to surprise us. And the violence and the gore of this still surprised me.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything to that, because that was it was almost poetic.
Thank you.
And the way you stated that, and that really leaves us with only one thing left to do, which is to rate the movie. And so Daniel and I went back and forth. There were a couple different options, and I think you've gone with the best one. So out of a possible 5 fistfuls of mashed potatoes, Daniel, how many fistfuls of mashed potatoes do you give Terrifier?
All right.
Terrifier 2.
Terrifier 2, right? So I enjoyed the hell out of this. It shocked me. It made me laugh. It surprised me. It had a good story. There's some great character arcs here. I feel like everybody who deserved some sort of development got some sort of development. And I'm not going to go the full 5 because, like you said, whether or not this movie deserves a 5 is really going to come down to whether or not Terrifier 3 can stick the landing. Yep. If Terrifier 3 can come out and tie some of this stuff up in a way that is satisfying, then in hindsight, you may look back on this and really appreciate some of these loose ends getting left. But if it doesn't, then those are always going to kind of plague me. So I can't go the full 5, but I don't know that those loose ends are worth losing a whole fistful of mashed potatoes. Right. Is kind of where I stand with this, because I I was, like I said at the top, I was ready for this movie to be mid, and I was so surprised. And not comparing it to the others, but just seeing how it's continued to evolve and gotten so much better. And everything, the special effects, the cinematography, the shots, the acting, it's all getting so much better that I feel comfortable sitting on this at 4.5. And the thing that is gonna bring it up from the 4 to the 4.5 is just how hard I laughed at some of this bullshit. Just some of this ridiculous stuff. And that development of Art the Clown as actually a clown really, really sets this apart, because seeing him just be a goofball, even when he's not murdering people, was fascinating to me. So I'm going to go 4.5, 4.5 fistfuls of mashed potatoes. How about you?
I am also going 4.5 fistfuls of mashed potatoes. Um, and it's for all those reasons. Um, I am fairly confident that after Terrifier 3 comes out, I'm gonna go back and rewatch this and say, you know what, it's perfect.
Right.
And because of its restraint in its storytelling, it makes for a better series. And I think that it really does take like a master storyteller to do something like that, where it's like I'm gonna pull back a little bit here so that I can really give it to you here. And I think Leon knows what he's doing. I have full faith in him that Terrifier 3 is not only going to live up to this, but it's going to make the entire series all that much better. But as it stands, those little quibbles are there. I do go back to that one shot, and it is just one shot. But it's the only time that when I think about the movie, I'm thinking about not the story or the character, but I'm thinking about it from outside of the story.
Right.
The shot of Sienna in the shower. Again, love the booby. Love the wet body. It's fantastic. Thank you for the great work you've done on yourself. However, I don't know that it makes the movie better. In fact, I think it detracts from it. So all that's going to leave it at 4.5 fistfuls of mashed potatoes for me.
So there you go. A solid, no need to do any math here. Just 4.5 fistfuls of mashed potatoes smashed right into Jonathan's dead mom face hole.
Yep.
So it was this movie's a lot. We owe one of the things that's funny is we always talk about whether or not we'd recommend this one. And this is one where, there are plenty of people I'm going to recommend it to, but there are also plenty of people where I'm going to go, look, I know you don't watch that. Don't watch Terrifier. Like it will. I could also see this movie turning people off of the genre completely. Again, it is for a specific audience. But if you were in that audience, and if you've been watching us, then we appreciate you so much. Thank you. Make sure you head to shiverpod.com, where you can find the links to follow us on all social media. We are at ShiverPod on everything now, including YouTube. We are at ShiverPod on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. You can find us there where you can watch us live. We are every Wednesday, 9/8 Central. If you go to Spotify, iTunes, wherever you find your podcast, you can go back and listen to other stuff that we've done. Recently found out that I've gotten some really good feedback on some of our episodes lately, including Barbarian and Oculus. A guy I know named Tyler found our Oculus episode, not even realizing that I was the host. He just found it and started binge listening before he found out I was the host. So we must be doing something right, because people are finding us and hooking on. So make sure you follow us on all that social media. We try to keep up with some fun memes, let you know what we're doing. Dave and I sat down today and we planned out through January. So we have got some great stuff coming up.
Do we want to give the rest of November out?
Yeah. So
Okay.
next week we are so we've stayed real current here lately with Barbarian and Terrifier. So we're going to we'll slowly roll back at first. Next week we are going to visit the Peter Jackson. It may have been his first big movie, in Dead Alive from 1992. And then
which I've never seen, and I mean, I know all about the movie,
right,
and the making of the movie, but I've never actually seen it, so I'm really excited.
I'm
about this.
so excited to do this with you after your first viewing of Dead Alive because it's incredible. And then we are going to step back even further. And Dave, we got a talkie coming up. Which one are we going to do?
Yeah, we do got a talkie coming, and it's going to be The Invisible Man from 1933. Finally, we were going to do it back a couple months ago, and then one thing led to another, and we just never got around to it. So we're getting back to James Whale, one of the greatest horror directors of all time, in that classic. Before we move into the holiday season,
Where we have got some spectacular stuff planned. We are going to be all over the map with the holiday season. So make sure you follow us on all of our social media and at Shiver Pod, and we will keep you updated on all of those as we get ready.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.